this is way too funny mad.
As long as you don't break your arm or your leg.
Yo!
Mama, be like this. Be like that. Be like that.
How do they?
Mama.
How do they do this?
Hold
Okay.
this how you do it.
Let me ask. I need you to help put my legs up right quick so I can see how I feel while I'm up there. Move.
Like who wants to
Lift them up. You gotta put one of your legs up. Oh shit. Oh hell no.
On August 20th, 2022, after 2 weeks, a mother of 4 would be found dead, murdered by her 48-year-old husband. The woman you see here, smiling, dancing, and making TikTok videos with her children, had no idea her days were numbered. Behind that radiant smile was a storm quietly brewing at home, one that would soon turn deadly. On August 20th, 2022, Crystal Anderson, a loving mother of 4, would vanish without a trace. For 2 long weeks, her family searched desperately, holding on to hope that she'd walk through the door again. But when detectives finally spoke to her 7-year-old son, the horrifying truth began to unfold.
I want everyone to know from Columbia to Wagner, and we've gotten some very good leads to keep those leads coming.
He was with him at her home. He came to her home, and he spoke with one of the kids.
He had seen his father, 48-year-old Tony Berry, forcing Crystal into the trunk of his 2007 Cadillac CTS. Soon after, Crystal would be found dead. And what investigators uncovered next would send shockwaves through the community. A chilling reminder of how far someone can go when their need for control turns into something far darker. This is the life and tragic death of Crystal Anderson. Crystal Anderson was born on February 9th, 1992. A 30-year-old, proud mother of 4 children, Crystal was described by those close to her as a loving, selfless, and kind person. Known for her bright smile and positive attitude, she had a magnetic energy that drew people to her. Her friends and family often described her as a beacon of light, someone who could always make you laugh, even on the toughest days. Whether she was making a joke or sharing an uplifting story, Crystal had a way of lifting the spirits of those around her. But she had a role that she loved. Her children were her world.
This is the right way to do this. When I grab that flower, what do I do? Fly, fly, pat that thing out, turn that thing out, hump that thing out, grab that wheel, beat the hoe.
And she dedicated herself to making sure they felt loved, cherished, and supported. Crystal believed strongly in the value of family and made sure her children understood the importance of kindness, hard work, and perseverance. While she juggled multiple jobs, including her work as a makeup and hairstylist, Crystal always prioritized spending quality time with her kids. In fact, it was often said that her greatest joy was seeing her children happy and healthy. She was known to go out of her way to make sure they had everything they needed, often sacrificing her own comfort to ensure they felt secure. Despite the pressures of life, Crystal found happiness in her work and was passionate about her craft. She was a talented stylist with an eye for beauty that extended beyond just hair and makeup. Many of her clients praised her not only for her skill, but also for the personal care she put into each appointment. Crystal would listen attentively to her clients, offering not just her services, but also her compassion and making them feel valued. Crystal also was an active presence on social media, particularly TikTok, where she posted videos of herself dancing, often accompanied by her children. It was a space where she could forget her struggles and share happiness with her followers. Her social media presence was a reflection of her personality. It was full of life, vibrant, and eager to connect with others. Her followers knew her as a woman who always tried to focus on the positives, even when her personal life was less than perfect. Crystal used her platform to spread joy, posting funny, heartwarming videos that made her audience feel like they knew her, even if they'd never met. But beneath the smiles, Crystal was deeply compassionate and empathetic. She took pride in being there for others, whether it was listening to a friend in need or offering a helping hand to someone going through a rough time. Her family and friends admired her for her ability to be both strong and nurturing, someone who could balance the demands of motherhood, work, and her own emotional well-being while still being there for the people she loved. Born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina, Crystal had a big family with 17 siblings who shared close-knit bonds. She grew up with a deep sense of community, often spending time with her siblings and extended family. Her mother, a strong woman who had taught Crystal the value of hard work and perseverance, was always her biggest supporter. However, despite the love and support from her family, Crystal found herself in a complicated and troubling relationship with Tony Berry. Tony, a 48-year-old man with a history of controlling behavior, was someone Crystal had been in an on and off relationship for years. He was charming at first, but over time, his behavior became increasingly possessive and abusive. Despite leaving him multiple times, Crystal returned each time, fearing the consequences of angering him. Tony's emotional manipulation and threats kept Crystal trapped in a cycle of abuse. Unfortunately, the emotional toll this relationship took on her was something she kept hidden from the world, including her social media followers. To them, she appeared vibrant and carefree, but behind the camera, her reality was far different. Crystal's family knew something was wrong, but she often downplayed her struggles, choosing to protect her children and keep the peace. She never wanted to burden anyone, even as her relationship with Tony grew darker. Despite her circumstances, Crystal remained determined to provide for her children, juggling multiple jobs and maintaining her social media presence. Her videos, which often showcased her dancing with her children, were a way for her to hold on to the moments of joy and love that still existed in her life. However, on August 20th, 2022, Crystal's life, which seemed so full of promise, took a tragic turn when she vanished without a trace. Her family grew frantic as they realized she had not been in touch with anyone, which was very uncharacteristic of her. Her social media pages went silent and calls went unanswered. Her children, who were used to seeing her active online, began to worry, and it wasn't long before they too were calling friends and family, desperate to find out where she was. Little did anyone know, this would turn into one of the most heartbreaking cases they would ever face. As the days passed with no word from Crystal, her family started to fear the worst. Her mother, who had always been her rock, knew something wasn't right. She contacted the police, urging them to take the situation seriously, but with no sign of foul play, they initially hesitated. However, as the hours turned into days, the urgency grew, and the investigation was soon underway, but there was one thing the police didn't know. The last person to see Crystal was none other than Tony Berry. Crystal's disappearance became an urgent concern when her sister Shadira Smothers received a troubling phone call on August 23rd, 2022, from one of Crystal's baby fathers. She reported that Crystal had failed to pick up their son, which was completely out of character for her. Crystal's sister immediately reached out to Tony Berry, Crystal's live-in boyfriend, who was also the father of her 7-year-old son. Tony claimed he hadn't seen her since Saturday at 1 a.m., and said he planned to report her missing. However, he never did. Shadira warned him that if he didn't, she would do so herself, and shortly after, she contacted the authorities. Shadira's instincts were right to be concerned. Crystal's family knew something was wrong the moment they realized she hadn't been in touch.
Unlike her, she's a mother of 4. She's got young kids. Family says she sometimes goes on these breaks, but never without her kids. So this is starting to raise some red flags. And now the Aiken County Sheriff's Office is involved.
Well, another thing to note on that too is Crystal's active on social media a lot. Her TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, anything you can think of.
Crystal, a devoted mother, would never leave her children without explanation. Her entire life revolved around them, and the thought that she might just disappear without a word was unfathomable. Tony's dismissive attitude only added to the growing unease. He had been in a volatile on and off relationship with Crystal, and the history of abuse in their relationship wasn't something her family could ignore. It wasn't long before Crystal's family reported her missing, making it clear that she would never disappear without her children. Tony went to the Wagoner Police Department on August 23rd and officially reported Crystal missing, but the inconsistencies in his story raised suspicions.
Involuntarily breaks, yes. A few of those, I have picked her up and brought her to North Carolina, but during these breaks, she's always had her children. I try to have faith and think that she's okay, that she's okay. We are not going to ever stop looking for you until we bring you home.
He told investigators that Crystal had left late on Saturday night around 1 a.m., but the details of his story seemed to shift with every telling. Tony claimed he had been in contact with Crystal's children and he had kept them home from school that day. He also claimed that Crystal often left without saying goodbye. However, Shadira knew something wasn't right. The idea that Crystal, who had always been so present in her children's lives, would leave without warning felt completely out of character. The family's concern only deepened as they realized that Tony was being vague about the circumstances of Crystal's disappearance. The whole family felt something was deeply wrong. They were worried about the abusive history between Crystal and Tony, which was a major red flag. Crystal had confided in them about Tony's controlling behavior, his temper, and the emotional toll it had taken on her. There had been previous incidents where Tony had isolated her from friends and family, making her feel like she had no one to turn to. Her family feared the worst, that Tony was somehow involved in her disappearance, but they had no evidence to prove it. But what investigators uncovered next would send the case into a new and terrifying direction. As authorities began to investigate, they found troubling signs that led them back to Tony. His story about the last time he saw Crystal was inconsistent, and his initial reluctance to report her missing raised alarm bells. But the real breakthrough came when police started to search Tony's home. A search of Tony's phone records revealed a disturbing series of messages between him and Crystal on the days leading up to her disappearance. But it was the messages between Tony and his close friends that really caught the attention of detectives. In one chilling message, Tony mentioned that it would be better for everyone if Crystal just went away. This, combined with the discovery of a blood-stained item in his home, made it clear that something sinister had occurred. The case that had started as a missing persons investigation was now spiraling into something far darker. As the police pieced together the timeline of events, they discovered even more shocking details about Crystal's final moments. Investigators interviewed neighbors who reported hearing a loud argument between Tony and Crystal on the day of her disappearance. Witnesses even said they saw Tony force Crystal into the trunk of his 2007 Cadillac CTS. The neighbors were alarmed when they heard Crystal scream and saw Tony dragging her toward the car. The car was later found burned in Newberry County in South Carolina, raising suspicions that Tony was involved in something far more sinister than just a domestic dispute. But then, something even more chilling emerged. The car in which witnesses reported seeing Crystal being forced into was discovered burned beyond recognition in Newberry County, South Carolina. But even more chilling was the evidence that was uncovered in Tony's behavior. Tony had been seen purchasing several items that could potentially be linked to the crime, including garbage bags, a shovel, plastic coveralls, and gloves, all items typically used for the disposal of human remains. More unsettling was the discovery that Tony had been searching how to commit a crime without leaving behind any evidence. Authorities began to suspect that this wasn't an act of passion or an accident, but a premeditated crime. It became clear to investigators that Tony had planned Crystal's disappearance and possibly her murder. He had gone to great lengths to cover his tracks, including researching how to eliminate evidence of the crime and even acting as if nothing was wrong when questioned by police. Despite his efforts, the police had found enough evidence to charge him with kidnapping, but the real question remained. Had Crystal been murdered, and if so, where was her body? After further investigation, a breakthrough came when investigators spoke to witnesses who had seen Tony in the early hours of August 20th, 2022. A neighbor came forward, stating that they had witnessed Crystal's 7-year-old son watching from a window as he saw his mother being forced into the trunk of Tony's car. The child later confirmed to investigators that he had seen Tony drag Crystal out of the house after a loud argument, and shortly after, heard the unmistakable sound of a scream. It was becoming clearer that Tony's relationship with Crystal had escalated from abusive to deadly. Police continued to look into Tony's history, and as they pieced the evidence together, they discovered a disturbing pattern of manipulation, threats, and violence that Tony had directed not just towards Crystal, but also her family. His abusive behavior, combined with the suspicious circumstances surrounding her disappearance, led to the assumption that Crystal had not just gone missing. She had been killed. A significant turning point came on Tony's cell phone records. It revealed that he had been near the site where the car was found burned, and this information further tied him to the crime. The growing list of evidence suggested that Tony Berry had committed a heinous crime. But there was still no sign of Crystal's body, and the family was still in agony, waiting for answers. But despite mounting evidence, Tony Berry remained free. Crystal's family was growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress in the case. Shadira, Crystal's sister, was especially vocal about the investigation's shortcomings. On her Facebook page, she posted an emotional plea for help, expressing her outrage at how the authorities had handled the case. She believed that Tony's involvement in Crystal's disappearance had been clear from the start, yet law enforcement had been slow to act, and they were not providing any updates to the family.
So apparently it's not against the law to kidnap someone, black, and put them in the trunk of a car, and it's also not against the law to set your vehicle on fire. Just say you were in a crack house and your car was stolen. 29 days later and my sister Crystal Janelle is still missing. She was heard screaming while being put in the trunk of Tony Berry's car, witnessed by her 9-year-old son. Aiken County Sheriff's Office was very insensitive and uncaring about my sister's disappearance from the very beginning and totally disregarded our family's cries for help. Even still, they don't have this man picture on the news. They are not even looking for this man or considering him a person of interest, even after finding his vehicle that was set on fire.
Her frustration stemmed from what she perceived as a lack of urgency on the part of the Aiken County Sheriff's Office. Shadira went on to claim that had Crystal been a white woman, the response would have been far more aggressive. The lack of an arrest, despite the evidence mounting against Tony, left the family feeling helpless and unheard. Shadira also pointed out the clear history of abuse between Crystal and Tony, which had been reported multiple times by Crystal herself.
I asked him when is the last time he saw her. He said Saturday night. I said, well, it's Tuesday. Why did you not report it? And he said, well, I kept the kids home from school today because I was going to make a report today.
Yet, nothing had been done to prevent the escalation of violence. This, coupled with the fact that Tony had been allowed to walk free for weeks, only deepened the family's pain and sense of injustice. But despite their frustration, the family remained determined. They organized public events, including prayer vigils and community support efforts, to keep Crystal's case in the spotlight.
The family of Crystal Anderson says her disappearance has been an emotional roller coaster as the days searching turned to weeks. Shadira Smothers is her sister.
We are going to bring Crystal home, and her story is going to be a testimony to help other women.
Friends and family shared her story on social media, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have seen something that could help solve the case. On September 28, 2022, after weeks of mounting evidence and growing public pressure, authorities arrested Tony Berry in connection with Crystal's disappearance. He was charged with kidnapping. The arrest followed a tip-off from an anonymous source who had information on his whereabouts. The arrest was a relief for Crystal's family, who had been fighting tirelessly for justice, yet the arrest marked only the beginning of a long road ahead. Investigators now believe that the car had been used to transport Crystal's body, and after completing their horrifying task, Tony and Darius had set the vehicle on fire to eliminate any trace of evidence. As the investigation deepened, the authorities began to uncover more disturbing details about the lengths Tony had gone to cover up the crime. Not only that, Tony had made several suspicious purchases before Crystal's disappearance. Phone records and witness testimonies continued to paint a horrifying picture. Tony had, in fact, kidnapped Crystal, put her in the trunk of his car, and later disposed of her body in an attempt to cover up the crime. But despite all this, Crystal's body had still not been found. The question on everyone's mind was, where was she? What had happened to Crystal after that night, and why hadn't her body been discovered yet? While the search for Crystal's body continued, the wheels of justice were starting to turn, and Tony Berry was about to face the consequences for his actions. On December 13, 2022, after months of investigation, Tony Berry was officially charged with murder in addition to the earlier kidnapping charge. The authorities had pieced together a damning case against him based on his actions, purchases, and phone records. The family, while relieved to see the charges finally pressed, felt a deep sense of frustration.
Mystery and frustration. Some say it doesn't even add up. Crystal Anderson was last seen here on August 20th and outside of her home in South Carolina. She was reported missing by her family 3 days later on the 23rd. Crystal and her boyfriend Tony Berry were both listed in the national database as missing, and 6 days later on August 29th is when they came here at News 12 to do an interview. They were saying how law enforcement was not helping them. And 14 days later, on September 6th, Berry walked into the Aiken County Sheriff's Office to let them know he indeed was not missing and was allowed to walk out after being questioned. And tonight, we're getting word Berry has been arrested.
Had the investigation been handled differently, would they have been able to save Crystal's life, or at least bring her home sooner? In a significant breakthrough, investigators discovered that Darius Berry, Tony's 23-year-old son, had been complicit in the crime. Darius was arrested on December 15, 2022, and charged with accessory after the fact for his role in helping his father cover up the crime. Investigators found that Darius had assisted Tony in burning the car and concealing evidence related to Crystal's murder. Both father and son were now facing serious criminal charges, but the search for Crystal's body remained the priority. Despite the mounting evidence, Crystal's body was still missing, and this continued to weigh heavily on her family. While Tony and Darius were in police custody, Crystal's sister, Shadira, continued her search. Her dedication to finding her sister never wavered, and she worked alongside investigators, often taking matters into her own hands when she felt the police weren't moving fast enough. She and other family members combed swamps, woods, and cemeteries in an attempt to find any trace of Crystal. But as weeks passed, the family grew increasingly desperate. Though arrests had been made and the case seemed to be closing in, the family's fight was far from over. The emotional toll of Crystal's disappearance and the murder was far-reaching, especially for her children. The 4 young children Crystal had left behind were devastated. They were forced to grow up without their mother, a pain that no child should ever have to experience. According to reports, the children were eventually placed with their fathers, but the emotional scars would likely remain for the rest of their lives. For Shadira and the rest of Crystal's family, the grief was compounded by the trauma of not knowing where Crystal's body was. They felt as though they had been robbed of their ability to properly mourn, and without closure, healing seemed impossible. Crystal's mother, Wanda Sumter, was especially distraught. She had been in constant contact with Crystal before her disappearance and could not fathom why this had happened to her daughter. Despite the pain, the Anderson family remained committed to seeking justice. They continued to speak out about their frustration with the investigation and how long it had taken for the truth to come to light. They were determined to see that Crystal's life and the impact her loss had on her children would not be forgotten. As Tony and Darius Berry sat behind bars, the question of where Crystal's body was remained unanswered. The Aiken County Sheriff's Office and the Anderson family, especially Shadira, pushed forward with the search, knowing that finding Crystal's body was the only way to bring full closure to the case. The family took to social media, urging the public to come forward with any information, no matter how small. They continued to offer the $10,000 reward for anyone who could help locate Crystal's remains. Meanwhile, investigators followed up on new leads and tips, combing through new areas where Tony and Darius might have hidden her. As the case continued to unfold, Crystal's family remained united in their quest for justice. They knew that while Tony and Darius were being held accountable, the healing process for Crystal's children and loved ones would take much longer. But they also understood that Crystal's story was far from over, and with each passing day, they hoped for the closure that had eluded them for so long. The Anderson family's relentless fight for justice and the search for Crystal's body was a testament to the love and determination they had for her. It was a painful reminder of the lengths families must go to when seeking justice for a loved one taken too soon. Let's let Crystal Anderson's story serve as a reminder that we must speak out against domestic violence and never let the victims' voices go unheard. For Crystal's family, may they soon find the closure they desperately need. And may justice continue to serve as a reminder that no one is above accountability for their actions. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.